Hello, everyone, and welcome to another lesson with Ralph. Hope you're fine. Well, today we're going to take a look at writing, and it's going to be Task 1 academic writing. So today's lesson will be really helpful to you if you have any problems with analyzing data and how to write a very good, well-structured, let's say, report. Today's lesson will be very helpful. And we'll start with analyzing different parts, different paragraphs of writing task 1. So first take a look at question. Let's see what the question is about, and then we'll analyze the data first of all, and then we'll start with writing our planning, how to plan, and then starting writing our full report. So that is our line graph, and the graph below shows the quantities of goods transported in the UK between 1972 and 2000 by 4 different modes of transport. All right, as you can see, this is an example of a line graph. And the first thing we want to do when it comes to building a plan is we need to identify the type of task that we're in, and the type of task we're in can be identified by looking at the axis. All right, so here along the horizontal axis, you can see a range of dates, right? And on the vertical axis, it's millions of tons of goods transported, right? But the main thing here is that if we have dates running along the bottom here, then we know that we're dealing with a graph with a trend, all right? It's very important because we're looking at how data changes over a time period. So when we have dates, all right, in the horizontal axis, then our graph is trend graph, all right? And that doesn't necessarily need to be a line graph. It might be a bar chart as long as there are different dates, all right? It could even be a pie chart, right? And we need to keep this in mind because it will influence the language we use when writing our response, all right? So we are going to use trend language like increase, decrease, fall, right? Go up, rise, or also some adverbs like dramatically, significantly. Let's say some adjectives like dramatic, significant, or let's say huge or sharp, all right? So these are the words that we need to use in writing our report when it's about trend graphs. Right, now let's start writing our planning. So in our planning, we should write the number of paragraphs. So our first paragraph is introduction. So what we basically do in writing our introduction is we restate or paraphrase the question, right? This is our first paragraph. And our second paragraph will be about our overview. So what is our overview? In overview paragraph, we'll look at the graph in a general way. I'll talk about this more. So we'll analyze the data, not the specific data, but the graph in a general way. And paragraph 3 and 4 will be about details of the graph. Now, what is overview paragraph? When we plan our overview, we should think about the data in a very general way. So what you absolutely shouldn't do here is include any specific figures. So you shouldn't talk about any numbers or figures in this paragraph. Instead, what you want to focus on here are either comparative elements, all right, or overall trend elements. So the overall trend elements would how A and B go up and C and D, for example, go down. So when it comes to graphs with a trend, it can actually be more useful to consider the comparative elements because you need to have at least one comparison, right? So when thinking of comparative elements, it's a good idea to think of superlative language. Superlative language, right? Like, for example, the most or the least of something. So in our graph, you can see the same in blue line, which let's say carried the top here, and it refers, as you can see the blue line, it refers to road transportation, all right? It is the highest throughout the whole period, all right? And the least would be the bottom line, and that is pipeline. As you can see, the orange color, it is the pipeline, and it is the least throughout the whole period. So this is the data that we are going to talk about in our, actually not the data, the general, let's say, information that we're going to provide in our overview paragraph. So in writing our overview paragraph in our planning, we should write overview paragraph, the road plus, which means it is the highest, and pipeline minus. It means that it is the lowest. All right. Now, in paragraph 3 and 4, when it comes to detailed paragraph, the ideal way is to create a clear theme or a clear central topic to use. So in this particular task, there are 4 categories, and it makes sense to talk about 2 of the categories in one paragraph and the 2 other in another paragraph, right? But even in that separation, you can still create another theme. For example, you might combine water and rail, as you can see, water and rail, which is green and a yellow line, right? Why? Because the start of these 2 categories are at a very similar point, right? And that could be the reason you combine these 2 together. And the road and pipeline, which we talked about it just before, which is the highest and the lowest, they're combined together, right? Because they are the highest and the lowest positions. So in our plan, we write paragraph 3, water and rail, and paragraph 4, road and pipeline, right? That is our plan in writing our report. Now, let's start writing our introduction, which is very important. In introduction, we basically paraphrase the question. We restate the question. Sometimes we change the word or the sentence order, all right? We use synonym language in order to demonstrate our ability in knowing a wide range of vocabulary, all right? So we'll start with writing like this. The question is, the graph below shows. So we can use synonym word instead of show, and demonstrate is a good word. So we'll start with the graph demonstrates. All right, demonstrates what? You know, in the question we have the quantities of goods transported. We have the quantities of goods. So when we have the number of, the amount of, or the quantity of something, you can always paraphrase this to how much and how many. And remember that how much is for uncountable nouns and how many is for countable nouns. All right, so I'm going to use how many here because I'm going to focus on actual unit of measurement, right? So the actual unit of measurement may not appear in the question, but it appears in the vertical axis, as you can see, and it's tons, right? So our actual unit of measurement is tons. So you may write how many tons of goods were transported in the UK. I'm not going to change the verb transported here because in writing our detail paragraphs, I will use the synonym language for this word too. All right, so we just use transport here. Now, here we move the dates, as you can see in the question, the dates between 1972 and 2000, all right? We're going to move this to the end of a paragraph and move different modes of transport before that, right? So now we may write by 4 separate forms instead of, let's say, 4 different modes. We can write 4 separate. Instead of different, we write separate. And instead of modes, we write forms of transport. And you can always change the date, for example, between date to date, from. Instead of between, you can write from. From 1972 to 2000. Now, let's take a look at introduction again. Let's see how we changed the question. The graph demonstrates how many tons of goods were transported in the UK by 4 separate forms of transport from 1972 to 2000. All right, that's a very good way. That's great way of writing our introduction. Now it's time to write our overview paragraph. As you know, in overview paragraph, we never write exact data. All right, we only talk about the key features. All right, we only talk about the most important aspect of this graph. And as you can see, as we talked about this, as you can see, the road, which is the blue line, was always the highest, and pipeline was always the lowest throughout the period. So we are going to write this. We most of the times we start writing our overview paragraph with a word like overall. Overall is a good word. Overall, then you need a phrase like it is clear that. Most of the times I use this phrase. It is clear that. Then we need a superlative, let's say, adjective, in order to show that we're talking about the highest. So the superlative word that we can use here is the highest. It is clear that the highest. All right, now, our unit of measurement is tons, all right? Now I'm going to change tons into noun. And a noun for tons is tonnage, all right? Tonnage. So we're going to write tonnage of goods. Overall, it is clear that the highest tonnage of goods was, instead of transport, we can write a synonym word like distributed, all right? Was distributed by road during the period. Let's read again. Overall, it is clear that the highest tonnage of goods was distributed by road during the period. Now, we're going to talk about the lowest. Now, here we need a cohesive device. Cohesive word device. Words you remember, you know that when we're talking about something which is the opposite of the previous sentence, we use some cohesive devices. The word that I'm going to use here is conversely, and always use comma after that. Conversely, now, as you can see in our previous sentence, we put road at the end of a sentence. Now I'm going to change it a little bit here. I'm going to use pipeline in the beginning of the sentence here. Pipeline was the conveyance method. Conveyance method. Conveyance is another word for transportation, all right, for distribution. That's the synonym word. Conveyance method, which carried the lowest weight throughout. We don't say throughout the period, all right, only throughout, that's enough. Now, that's the overview paragraph. Let's read it again. Overall, it is clear that the highest tonnage of goods was distributed by road during the period. Conversely, pipeline was the conveyance method which carried the lowest weight throughout. All right, now it's time to start writing our paragraph 3 and paragraph 4. Here we're gonna delve into details. We're gonna write about the data, all right, the key features of the graph. Now, one thing which is very, very, very important is that the beginning and end of each of these lines should be written in your detailed paragraphs. The beginning and the end are the most important data that you should write in your, let's say, paragraph 3 and 4. And the data, the exact data of these two periods, the beginning and end, should also be mentioned. Now, in the middle of a graph, in the middle of a line graph, or either if it's pie chart, I don't know, if it's bar chart, if there are key features, you can write about the exact data too. But you can omit writing the exact data of the middle of a graph if the data are not that much important, all right? But the beginning and the end should always be written. Now, we'll start with writing our paragraph 3. Now, when we are going to refer to specific categories, we can start with focusing on. Focusing on, for example, A and B. Now, here in this paragraph, we're going to focus on water and rail, all right? So we say, focusing on water and rail as means of transport, then we write comma. These distributed, so we're going to write the beginning of these two. Look at 1972. The beginning for water is around 39, and for rail it's 40, right? So we should write something like this. These distributed 39 million and 40 million tons of goods. Now, we need an adverb here which shows that 39 is for water, refers to water, and 40 refers to rail. Now, the adverb here is respectively, all right? Respectively, and then we need the date in 1972. So when you mention the exact data in the beginning, you should consider two important things. The first one is to write the date, what date it is, which is 1972 here, and the exact number of the data, as we wrote here too, 39 and 40 million tons. Right, now as you can see, here, in 1976, a very important thing happens. What's that? The figures change here. For water, we can see increase, and for rail, decrease. All right, so this is key feature. We should write about this. By 1976, their figures were identical at 40 million tons. So this is very important. We write that up to this time, the figures were the same. So I do not write the same. I use the word identical, which sounds much better. All right. After which, we need sequencing language. Sequencing language shows that after that period, this takes place or this happens, all right? After which, water conveyance increased considerably. It is not that much sharp, all right, but there is a considerable increase, all right? So I use the structure of verb and adverb. Increased considerably. Now, what happened to rail? All right, there was fall. All right, now as, which shows the opposite, as rail transportation fell, because that was not a considerable decrease. I only write fell without any adverb. All right, now what happens? As you can see, rail, which is the yellow line, in 2000 is the same as the beginning. Although there were some fluctuations, right? But at the end, the ending point is the same as the beginning point. So the word that we can use here for this type of data is recover. When the end of a period of a line graph or bar chart is the same as the beginning, you can write the verb recover. So I continue writing this paragraph like this. Rail distribution eventually recovered, right? Now, before that, there were some fluctuation, right? So I use the sequencing language to mention the data before 2000. And the word that we can use here is following. Following some fluctuation to 41 million tons transported in 2000, right? And again, here we have the exact data, because it is the ending of that period, because we're talking about the ending, all right? So let's read this again. Rail distribution eventually recovered following some fluctuation to 41 million tons transported in 2000. All right, we're done. We're done with rail. Now let's talk about water. What happened to water? And meanwhile, this is a very good cohesive device. Meanwhile, transport via water. What happened to water? As you can see, from 1980 up to 1992, it was the same. So the verb that we can use for this when something is the same throughout a specific time is level off or level out, right? Both are correct. And we should make it to a past tense, leveled out. So transport via water, leveled out around, you should write the number of the data, around 59 million tons, right? Now here in 1996, we see a very small, let's say, decline, all right? Not a that much considerable decline. So the word here we can use is dip, all right? Dip. Now, we should say before dipping in 1996, and what happens after that? There was a rise from 1996 up to 2000, right? And then rising to 62 million in 2000. Again, I write the exact data at the end of a period, at the end of a line graph. Now let's read this paragraph together again. Focusing on water and rail as means of transport, these distributed 39 million and 40 million tons of goods, respectively, in 1972. By 1976, their figures were identical at 40 million tons, after which water conveyance increased considerably as rail transportation fell. Rail distribution eventually recovered following some fluctuation to 41 million tons transported in 2000. Meanwhile, transport via water leveled out around 59 million tons before dipping in 1996 and then rising to 62 million in 2000. All right, that's the all for paragraph 3. We mentioned the beginning of each of these categories and the end, and also key features in the middle of the period. Now, let's talk about road and pipeline in paragraph 4. We use a word as for in order to start and refer to the two remaining categories. And remember something, as for is always, all the time used in paragraph 4. So you shouldn't use it in paragraph 3, because as for means to refer to the remaining of the categories, all right? As for road and pipeline, as you remember, in our previous paragraph, we used the structure of respectively, in which we mentioned two categories and then we provided two data, and then we used respectively. Now here, I'm going to use the structure of former and latter. Former and latter. All right. I mentioned road and pipeline. So road is the first and pipeline is the second. So I'm going to write the former, which refers to road. The former rose from 72 million tons in 1972. So the beginning is very important, all right? Rose from 72 million tons in 1972 to about 98 million in 2000. You can see in 2000 it's 98 million, about 98 million. So when you're not sure about the number, you can write some adverbs like about, around, approximately. While the latter refers to pipeline, began at around 2 million tons, you can see in 1972. And here, I'm going to write from 1972 up to 1992, all right, the next 20-year period. And I'm going to write the degree of difference, the degree of difference. So it was 2 in, let's say, 1972 and 1992, that was around 22. So the degree of difference is 20 million tons, right? So I'm going to write like this. Again, let's start from while the latter began at around 2 million tons before growing by 20 million. By 20 million. It's when we're writing about the degree of difference, we write by. We use by. By 20 million over the next 20 years. And remaining at approximately 22 million, as you can see, 22 million remains until the end, all right? At approximately 22 million until the century's end. So instead of 2000, because 2000 is the end of the century, right? I write a synonym word instead of 2000 because we used the date 2000 a lot in our report. So the century's end would be a proper synonym for 2000. All right. That's all for today, guys. We worked on task 1, trend graph, writing a full report, band 9 sample report, and I hope you learned a lot here in this lesson. We'll cover more data, more line graphs, comparative graphs like bar chart, pie charts, also diagrams and maps. So if you like this lesson, I would really appreciate it if you just liked it. And if you have any questions, you can simply ask in comments. I will kindly answer all your questions. And then we'll cover more, let's say, graphs and data in our next episodes. Until next time, enjoy your time, stay tuned, and goodbye.